Milne.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Abetz. And I ask, if circumstances don't change, Australia will be left with no direct action plan, no carbon price and no emissions trading scheme. Will the government—
Order. 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 Senator Milne is entitled to be heard in silence. Order. Senator Milne.
Thank you, Mr President.
Senator Milne.
Will the government now move to a new emissions trading scheme, or is the Prime Minister prepared to leave the country with no economy-wide plan to tackle climate change?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Abetz.
Mr President, I thought the standing orders had something in it about hypothetical questions, and if ever there was a hypothetical question, I would have thought this would have been it. But in relation to the question posed to me about action on climate change and ensuring that there are less emissions going into the atmosphere, I would have thought a price indicator might have been helpful, for example, fuel. But of course, our good friends in the Australian Greens now think that is a very, very bad policy. A very, very bad policy. And look, we acknowledge that policy statement by the Australian Greens, as we have acknowledged the statements made by other parties that will soon be represented in this chamber. And we as a government, as always, will seek to pursue the mandate that was entrusted to us by the Australian people, and we will seek to pursue that. If this place, as it has decided from time to time, not to accept the will of the Australian people, then so be it. But until we cross those bridges, I'm not going to be engaged in hypothesising as to what may or may not happen. Suffice to say, this government is absolutely committed to getting rid of the carbon tax, which will go up again on the 1st of July because the Labor Party continues to keep it on life support, as a result undermining the cost of living for many households and destroying jobs right throughout our economy. So we as a government want to get rid of the carbon tax. On the other side of the ledger, we are completely committed to our direct action plan, and we will seek to implement that to achieve the outcomes that we put to the electorate, not only in 2013 but also in 2010. A very sensible plan, a plan that has been aired in the public for over 3 years.
Senator Milne.
Thank you, Mr President. Given the Prime Minister's abhorrence of environmental regulation, or so-called green tape, and his desire to hand over environmental powers to the states, who would oversee compliance and enforcement of regulatory measures to implement direct action when it fails to secure legislative approval?
Well, I don't know if that is hypothetical. If you wish to order, I will give you, as I've given others before you, the opportunity to rephrase that question. Senator Milne.
Thank you, Mr President. So I rephrase it by asking, will the government implement direct action through environmental regulation or so-called green tape?
The Minister.
Mr President, what the senator ought to understand by now is that just because you have a whole lot of regulation or indeed a whole lot of expenditure does not necessarily mean that you are going to get a good outcome. And the Greens have been tying up our nation time and time again with all this green tape, which in fact has perverse environmental outcomes. And of course the biggest example of that is the carbon tax, which saw manufacturing leave this country to go to China and other places where the emissions are greater than they would have been if they would have remained in Australia in a pre-carbon tax environment. So I say to the honourable senator, green tape does not necessarily mean good environmental outcomes, and that is why we as a government will look at every proposal on its merits, and we will seek to implement a policy that does
Order.
deliver
Time's
direct action
expired.
without tying everybody
Time
up
has
in—
expired. Senator Milne.
President, so just to be really clear, does the government rule out regulation to implement direct action?
The Minister.
Mr. President, look, the very simple answer to this is that we will do that which is necessary to implement direct action, and that might mean some legislation, it might need some funding, it might need some regulation. Whatever it might need, we will seek to introduce our direct action plan, and we look forward to the support of the Australian Greens. But yeah, I'm saying this on the last day of this Senate sitting because I'm engaging in a bit of wishful thinking in that regard. But look, the simple fact is that we are determined to introduce our direct action plan, which we've taken to the people not once but twice, and we believe it is a good sound policy. We will seek to implement it in the best way possible. As to the details as to how it might be implemented, I'm sure my good friend and colleague Mr Hunt will be able to provide you with all the details that I might not be able to on this occasion.
Senator Boyce.